Okay, so last time we said that there was Rava's Chakira, but the Cham sheet of Chati Nezek, in the case of Tzroros, do you pay me a Guf or do you pay me Aliyah? So that was Rava's question. We tried to address that question from the Brisa regarding Hidos Vihitas. Ultimately, we said, no, you can't bring a raya from that Brisa. So now the Gemara turns to the Mishnah, and Daf Chaf Aleph Amid of an Abayz, where the Mishnah discusses the case of Kelev Shenatal Charara. Now what happens over there? The dog takes a cake, it picks it up, attached to the cake, let's assume for now, it also takes along a gachelas, a kol. It takes the gachelas and the charara over to a gadish. That's where it heads over. It heads over to a gadish. Now, the kelev eats the charara, and it drops the kol, and the kol burns down the gadish. So now the question is, in the Mishnah, how much do you pay? Well, the question is, wait a second, how much do you pay for what? So for the charara, the charara is easy, right? For the case of the charara, how much you're going to have to pay? Well, that's a case of shein, right? It's just eating the charara, it's normal food for it to eat, and so that's a case of damaging in order to get hana. That would be shein. Well, shein is a case of muad. If it's a case of muad, how much you're going to pay? You're going to pay nezek shalim. So that's easy. What about the gadish, though? How much you're going to have to pay for the gadish that was burned down as a result of this kol? So the Mishnah tells us that according to this sheet of the Chachamim, you're going to pay chati nezek. Now, in order to understand this, though, there is a brisa. The brisa tells us that when you pay chati nezek, remember, we said that anytime you're talking about chati nezek, we always have to know not just how much you pay, but from what you pay. Do you pay meguf or do you pay me'aliyah? So the brisa tells us that there's another brisa that adds in this detail. And the brisa tells us that for this shita of the chachamim, it's going to be chati nezek megufo. And the brisa also tells us that there's another shita out there, and that's the shita of Rav Elazar. Rav Elazar tells us that in this case of gadish, you don't actually pay chati nezek. You're going to pay nezek shalim. You're going to be full damages. But he agrees that you're going to pay megufo. So let's get the shita straight. According to the Chacham tell us that in the case of Kelev Shenat Charara, which we're going to assume that Kelev brings along the kol is stuck to the bottom of this cake, so it takes the cake straight off the coals, and it drops the kol, eats the cake. For the cake, that's easy, you're going to have to pay nezek shalim, but for the gadish, how much are you going to have to pay for the gadish that was burned down as a result of the kol? So according to the Chachamim, how much you pay chati nezek. But the Brisa adds in further that you're going to have to pay, the chati nezek is going to be megufo. However, the Brisa also tells us another shita, the shita of Rav Elazar. Rav Elazar says, I agree that you pay megufo in this case, but you're going to pay nezek shalim. Now here is the issue. Let's ignore the second part over here, the opinion of Rav Elazar. Let's ignore that for now. So now, if we ignore that, what are we going to be left with? We're going to deal with the Chacham's opinion. Wait a second. What's the Chacham's opinion here? The Chacham's opinion is that you're going to pay, in this case of Kelev Shenat Charara, you're going to pay chati nezek megufo. Now, why do you ever pay chati nezek for damages? So up until this point, up until Yudzayin Abayz and Baba Kama, you would have said, oh, well, that's easy. Why are you paying chati nezek for anything? You're going to pay chati nezek because chati nezek, hang on a second, chati nezek is associated with tam. But if chati nezek is associated with tam, that's one way to understand this case. So I could have just said, yeah, the case of Kelev Shenat Charara is a case of tam. But the Gemara ignores that possibility for now. The Gemara says, you know what? Maybe what's going on over here is that, why did the Chacham say chati nezek? Because the case of Kelev Shenat Charara, that case is a case of Tzroros. Now wait a second. If that's a case of Tzroros, right? How is it a case of Tzroros? Wait a second. Tzroros means that an animal is doing something normal. Tzroros of Orche, I should say. The animal is doing something normal. As a result of its normal behavior, something gets energized, an intermediate gets energized. So let's say when an animal is walking, let's say a stone gets flicked out, the stone goes flying and does damage. How is this case of Kelev Shenat Charara, where it picks up a charara and a gachelas, a case of Tzroros? So to keep things simple for now, what we're going to say, we're going to assume the opinion of Rav Yochanan. We know that in the Gemara, later on, there is a machlokas between Rish Lakish and Rav Yochanan regarding the status of Eish. Whenever you have damages of Eish, so let's say, for example, you're making a barbecue in your backyard, and the fire is going from your backyard into your neighbor's backyard, and it burns down the tree next door. So now the question is, how much are you going to have to pay? So wait a second though. When we look at this age, when we look at this fire that's going from your backyard to the neighbor's backyard, how do we view that? Do we view that it's like your direct damage? It's like you're throwing things at the tree that are ruining it, or do we view it as like a piece of your property? It's like like your dog going from your backyard into your neighbor's backyard and eating off the trees. In other words, do we treat it like it's your direct damage, like it's adam amazik, or do we treat it like it's mammon amazik, like it's your property damage? So that is a machlokas between Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rav Yochanan is of the opinion that when we're dealing with a case of Eish, we say that Isho is Mishum Chetzio. It's like your arrows, it's like your energy, it's Adam Hamazik. Now wait a second. If that's the way that Eish works, so we view that Eish is a function of your energy, right? It's like your energy being put into something, like you throwing at something. So what about if I have Eish as a result of an animal? For example, the case of the Kelev. The Kelev brings the Gachelas. The Gachelas is the Eish of the dog. The Eish then goes, after the dog drops it, the Eish goes and burns down the Gadish. If that's the case, then that's koach. That's considered like the dog exerting its koach to damage something, right? Just like Eish is koach of an Adam. That's how we view it according to Rav Yochanan, just to keep things simple for now. Then when we're talking about Eish of an animal, that would be koach of an animal. Now wait a second. Koach of an animal has another name. What would we call that? We would call that Tzroros. So now, so if that's the case, the Kelev brings the Charara along with the Gacheles. The Gacheles is dropped, the Kelev drops it. Now, remember, at this stage where we're going to assume that the Gacheles is not in the dog's mouth. If the Gacheles were in the dog's mouth, that wouldn't be normal behavior. We're assuming the Gacheles is stuck to the bottom of this cake. It picks up the cake, but the Gacheles is stuck to the bottom. It drops the Gacheles near the Gadish, and it burns down the Gadish. If this is truly a case of Tzroros, so then what do you see? You see that in the case of Tzroros, Chacham tell us that what do you have to pay, and from what do you pay? Well, it's Chatzi Nezek, and you pay Megufo. So that seems to address Rava's question very nicely. Rava's question that we talked about before was, in the case, according to the Chamim, in the case of Tzroros, where it's Orche, it's as a result of normal behavior, we know that you pay Chatzi Nezek, but do you pay Megufo, or do you pay Me'aliyah? So now it seems pretty clear, if we assume, if our assessment is correct, that the case of Kel Shanat Charara is in fact a case of Tzroros, so then you see that according to the Chum, in the case of Tzroros, you pay Chatzi Nezek and you pay Megufo. That's what the Gemara suggests as a way to answer Rava's question. But the Gemara says that that's not true. You can't say that. Why can't you say that? You can't say that because the Brisa brought up another opinion, the opinion of Rav Elazar. What was Rav Elazar's opinion? Rav Elazar's opinion was that in this case of Kel Shanat Charara, you're paying Nezek Shalim and you're paying Megufa. Now, why is that a problem? That's a problem because if you assume that the case of Kel Shanat Charara is a case of Tzroros, and Rav Elazar is telling you pay Nezek Shalim, wait a second, in case of Tzroros, of Orche, where you're paying Nezek Shalim, who else holds that way? We know that's Sumchis' opinion. Sumchis' opinion is that in the case of Tzroros, you're paying Nezek Shalim. But if he holds that way, that you pay Nezek Shalim in a case of Tzroros, so then if Rav Elazar is also saying you pay Nezek Shalim, and we're right that this is a case of Tzroros, then that means that Rav Elazar is really in Sumchis' camp. If Rav Elazar is in Sumchis' camp, then what would the answer be to the question of from what do you pay? So we said before that according to Sumchis it's obvious, right? That according to Sumchis, in the case of Tzroros of Orche, he says that Orche is like Muad, Nezek Shalim is like Muad, so then when we get to the question of from what, it's obviously going to be Me'aliyah, just like any other case in Muad. Well then wait a second, if Rav Elazar is in Sumchis' camp, because it's a case of Tzroros and he says Nezek Shalim, how could he say that you're paying Megufo? That doesn't make any sense. Why would he say that you pay Megufo if he's in Sumchis' camp? There's no way that Sumchis would say that in the case of Tzroros you pay Nezek Shalim and you pay Megufo. And so, because of that, it can't be that this is a case of Tzroros. It just can't be that it's a case of Tzroros, because if the case of Kel Shanat Charara is a case of Tzroros, then Rav Elazar's opinion doesn't make sense, because Rav Elazar is taking sides, he's holding on Sumchis, but if he holds like Sumchis, there's no way he would say to pay Megufo. He would say, obviously you'd pay Me'aliyah. So therefore, it can't be that it's a case of Tzroros. It must be it's some other case. It must be that the Chacham say Chatzi Nezek, and Rav Elazar says Nezek Shem Megufo for some other reason, and therefore we're going to have to scrap this. So this is, again, just to put it all together so far, we had Rav's Chakira, according to the Chum, do you say Chatzi Nezek? When you say Chatzi Nezek in the case of Tzroros, you're paying Megufo, you're paying Me'aliyah. We tried to address that based on the Brisa. We rejected that way to address the question. So we brought up this Mishnah from later on, the Mishnah and Daf Chaf Alf Amid Beis, in Baba Kama, where the Mishnah gives us the case of Kel Shanat Charara. The Chum tell us that you pay for the Gadish, you're going to pay Chatzi Nezek, and we know the Brisa tells us you pay Megufo. And so you see that in the case of Kel Shanat Charara, we're going to assume that that's a case of Tzroros. In the case of Tzroros, the Chum say you pay Chatzi Nezek Megufo. The problem is, though, that Rav Elazar's opinion is not going to make any sense, because Rav Elazar says you pay Nezek Shalim, which means that if it's a case of Tzroros, of Orche, he's siding with Sumchas, but if he's siding with Sumchas, there's no way Rav Elazar can also say that you pay Megufo. And so therefore the Gemara says, okay, so we're going to have to reassess this whole attempt to address Rava's question from this Mishnah and Daf Chaf Alf on Beis. So this point, what we have to bear in mind is that we have one of two options at this stage in the Gemara. I can either say, you know what, you're right, this can't be a case of Tzroros of Orche, but if we do that, if we say that the case of Kal Shanat Charar is not a case of Tzroros of Orche, Tzroros as a result of normal behavior, then what does that mean for Rava's question? That means that we can't address Rava's question based on this Mishnah. But if we are going to say that this is a case of Tzroros of Orche, then we are going to have to figure out how is it possible for Rav Elazar to say that you pay Nezek Shalim and also Megufa. Okay, so